The overwhelmed brain is all about navigating through life's challenges in the most emotionally intelligent way possible. I try. But what about navigating through relationship challenges? Well, back in 2019, I decided to address those specifically in my other podcast, Love and Abuse. If you want to figure out why a relationship in your life is way harder than it should be, head over to loveandabuse.com. Welcome to the Overwhelmed Brain, where you'll learn to make decisions that are right for you so that you can create the life you want now. Hello, this is Paul Coliani, and I'm here to help you learn to deal with difficult people and tackle life's challenges without compromising who you are. This show consists of my personal opinions and is meant for informational purposes only. Always seek a professional for your mental health and well-being. I mentioned emotional intelligence. I rarely mention that, even though this is a personal growth show for the critical thinker. It's my old tagline. And when I created this thing that I call the overwhelmed brain, that was what I wanted. I wanted to share the best way to grow and develop personally and emotionally using critical thinking skills. And I think critical thinking is all about keeping your mind open and looking at things from many angles, if you have to. I mean, not all decisions cater to that. Not all decisions are you're able to do that. But if you are able to keep your mind open with anything that comes along, then you can make the best decisions. You can make what I like to call decisions that are right for you. And those are the best decisions because they are in alignment with what you want and who you are and what you believe, what you value. And then when you bring people into your life, do those people align with you? Do they align with your beliefs and your values? And does it matter? Does it matter if somebody in your life doesn't align with you completely? The problem is when somebody doesn't align with you, when somebody has different beliefs, different values, then you're more likely to get into disagreements and maybe even arguments, fights, brawls, maybe, but hopefully you don't, but it can and does happen. I think it's important to practice being emotionally intelligent. It's not something that we can all do very easily. I mess it up a lot. And when I do, I try to recover. I came up with kind of an idea of how to approach life. And that is, it's all about practicing how to approach every situation in an emotionally intelligent way. And this is what I came up with. You may not agree, but I really think practicing emotional intelligence is more about assuming that you are solely responsible for conveying a message that can be understood, as opposed to assuming the person trying to receive the message is incompetent. I'll say it again. Assuming you are solely responsible for conveying a message that can be understood. So your goal is to convey your message in a way that they understand. So if they speak Spanish and you speak English, how would you convey the message so that they understand? You would probably start by speaking Spanish. And this is the way I look at people and the world and reality. You have to enter into somebody else's model of reality in order to convey a message that they understand. I mean, everyone has a different way of understanding and different perceptions and different beliefs and ideas. But in order to convey a message that they really get, that you really want to convey, I think it's important to remember that so that when you aren't being understood, you can ask yourself where they're coming from. Hey, that person that speaks Spanish is probably coming from an entirely different set of values and beliefs, and of course, different language, different culture maybe. And when you try that on, this is how you step into their reality. You ask yourself, if I were them, how would I take that message? That's part of being empathetically understanding. You're stepping into their shoes. This is how, this takes a lot of practice. This is how I talk to people most of the time. But I don't always, sometimes we'll get into conversations and we'll just talk back and forth. We don't think about this stuff. We have to think about this stuff when there's a misunderstanding. And there are a lot of misunderstandings that happen all the time. So we have to be cognizant why they're misunderstanding. And it is possible they're misunderstanding because we're not stepping into their model of the world. I'm using that specific lingo because that's what I learned in NLP like a decade and a half ago. And NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, teaches that. It teaches how to communicate with others in an effective way. And that is one of the things that I took from my training. And it's still stuff I study today, but it's what I took that changed my life. I learned that communication is 100% my responsibility. I took that with me throughout life, and it has kept me out of trouble. It has kept me out of a lot of arguments, and it kept the other person out of the argument as well, because I took responsibility. I took responsibility for the message I was conveying. So if I say something that you don't understand or you're not getting, I could respond in a way and say, you're just stupid. I could do that, and that wouldn't be effective or nice, but I could do that. I could say, you don't get it because you're an idiot, or you don't know enough, or you're not smart enough. Or I could say, I'm not speaking in your language. I'm not speaking from your reality, from your model of the world. I'm not seeing things from your perspective. And if I chose to do that, then I could communicate it. Now, someone might say, well, you can't teach someone who doesn't have a foundational knowledge something more advanced. And I would say, maybe not, but you can teach them the foundational knowledge. You can start there. And then somebody will come along and say, well, not everyone's brain is wired the same. So you may never see eye to eye. You may never be able to get your message across. That's true. My brain isn't wired for strong math skills, but somebody else knows math inside and out. My brain is wired to think about how we communicate, how we get along with people or don't get along with them, how we can show up in the most effective, most productive, most resourceful way possible in the world and around others. I'm thinking about that stuff all the time. I'm thinking about it. I'm writing about it. I'm talking about it on the air. That's how my brain is now specifically wired. And it's also technically wired. I know a lot of technical stuff, computers and technology. It's just wired that way. I just grew up with that stuff, and I do well around those lines of thinking. And somebody else may not. So you may listen to me and get a perspective that you hadn't thought of. Doesn't mean you can't think of it, just you haven't thought of it, or you needed it put in a way that might help your life. I hope that would help your life. Everything I talk about here, I hope helps your life. That's my goal. But I know you could teach me something that I don't know or don't know well that would certainly be educational for me. You could do that for me, but I might need to know the foundational knowledge behind it or under it so that I could build from it. But if you were to try to teach me some advanced calculus right now, I would be confused because I don't have the foundational knowledge to build upon to get to that point. But you could teach me the foundational knowledge, and hopefully I would be able to get to that point. I probably wouldn't want to, but I probably could learn. My brain is capable of learning, just like yours is. But the whole point of what I'm trying to say here is when we communicate, we have to remember that the foundation of somebody else's knowledge doesn't match ours. There may be similarities, and maybe we believe we know them so well that we can communicate with them about anything and they should understand. But again, coming back to a philosophy that I adopted a long time ago to help me communicate with others is that I am 100% responsible for communication and for the understanding of that communication. The specific, what they call presupposition in NLP, is the meaning of communication is the response that you get. Think about that for a moment if you haven't heard this concept. The meaning of what you're communicating is the response. It's based on the response that you get from the other person. So if I say, hey, this round peg fits in this round hole, and the other person looks at me funny, I could think that they're just being an idiot and not getting it or not putting the pieces together in their mind, but I know they're capable, so I might look down on them. I could do that. Or I could question myself, and I could ask myself, did I explain that in a way that they understand? I can't tell you the number of conversations that my partner and I have where she says something that she assumes that I understand fully because I think she believes I'm smart. And I'll look at her funny and I'll say, I don't understand. And then she'll say, what don't you understand? And then I'll respond. And then we eventually talk it out because I understand that I don't have the foundational knowledge that she does. So I kind of have to say, I don't understand. Can you walk me through it? Can you start at the beginning? Can you start here? I don't know. She's not as patient as I am. And I'm only saying that because she admitted it this morning. She doesn't have the patience. We were talking about taxes and end of the year stuff. And she said, okay, this is all you need to tell the financial advisor. This is all you need to say. Call them up and tell them that. And I said, if I do, I know as soon as I hang up, you're going to ask me if I asked them a question. And I'm going to say, no, I didn't ask them about that question because I don't know enough about it to ask. And she knows that's true because we've done this before. I've called someone or I've emailed someone and I wrote down exactly what she said. And then she'll ask, well, did you ask this? And I'll say, no. And she'll say, why not? And I'll say, I didn't know I was supposed to ask that. So I feel sort of like a dummy when that happens because her question is valid, but I don't think like her. And I don't have the foundational knowledge that she has. So she'll ask me questions that I should have asked. And I say, no, I didn't ask that. And then we'll get into a conversation and I'll say, next time I call, please be with me. Please be here because you know what to ask. And I've decided to accept those limitations about me. I've decided to accept that I am limited in the ability to ask the appropriate follow-up questions in certain areas of life that I'm not too familiar. She knows more about finances and taxes and math and all that stuff. And great, that's an awesome compliment to my skill set. So I want her involved in those areas of our life because she is more skilled. Now, when she tries to explain things to me, I get some of it and I don't get some of it. The good thing is we are really good communicators most of the time, but sometimes it becomes a challenge. She'll say something I won't understand, or I'll say something and she won't understand. In fact, it happened last night. I remember we were laying in bed and I was I was asking her about some ointment that she was putting on her legs, some skin issue. And I said, oh, you have the other tube of it. And she says, yes, I have it all right here. And I was trying to ask her, well, where is it? And she said, it's right here. And I said, you have both right there? And she said, no, I only have this. What are you talking about? I have it all right here. And so we were going back and forth. And instead of getting upset, I decided that she's not understanding what I'm saying, but it's not her limitation, it's mine. This is coming right back to taking responsibility for the way you communicate, for the message that is being conveyed. And when you take responsibility for what meaning comes out of what you're communicating, then you are able to keep a clear, balanced, grounded position. And when I say grounded, I just mean calm. You're able to look at it objectively, stay calm, stay relaxed, and have a real conversation on it. So when she said, it's right here, I don't know what you're talking about, I finally just reminded myself that I wasn't communicating clearly. This is the problem. I'm going to take responsibility for the way I'm communicating it, and I'm not going to assume that she is just not getting it because she's not capable. Because I've known her for a long time now, she is very capable. So it's clearly not her messing this up, it's me. And even if it was her messing it up in some way, I'm still taking responsibility for it. So instead of saying, you're not getting it, I told her that I think she misunderstands me. Now that still sounds like I'm actually pointing the finger, and I probably could have said or should have said, I think I'm not conveying this correctly. In fact, thinking about it now, that's how I should have said it. But it went okay when I said, I think you're misunderstanding me, because I wasn't trying to be accusatory. I wasn't trying to make her feel like an idiot. I just said, I think you're misunderstanding me, and let me rephrase. And so I did. I rephrased it, and it was still a misunderstanding, and she still didn't get what I was saying. So again, I took responsibility and I rephrased it again. I said, okay, let's just go right back to the beginning, and this is what I mean. And I wasn't getting frustrated. I was absolutely okay with rephrasing it, because I knew the way I was conveying it wasn't being understood. It wasn't being heard in the way I wanted. So I took responsibility. This is what I mean. When you take responsibility for your communication, you might actually be able to stay out of arguments. You might be able to have a decent night because it didn't go there. It didn't become a problem like some conversations turn into. And when you have two people that do that, when you have two people that take responsibility for the meaning of their communication, then you have something magical. It doesn't happen in my household, but it can and does happen when you have two people that practice this. It probably won't ever happen here because she doesn't listen to my show. And I don't want to be her teacher. I don't want to be her therapist unless she needs it and she wants it and she asks for it. I must stay humble, and I must know that I'm not always right, because I'm still on this planet learning just as everyone else is, and staying there keeps me open-minded. It keeps me learning what I need to learn, because there's always something more to learn. Even all this stuff that I know that actually seems to work when I use it, there's still more to learn about it. There's still more to fine-tune. And I just keep an open mind to that. Like I say at the end of every episode, keep an open mind. When you keep an open mind, you get to step into your power. I love being able to step into my power, which is all about having more choices. I believe empowerment is all about having choices, having more choices, having options at your disposal, and not feeling stuck. When we're stuck, we don't feel empowered. We feel disempowered. When we're not stuck, when we know we have a choice, then at least we feel like we can do something about it, even if we don't like the choice. So that's where I like to be. I like to be in a position where I always have a choice, even if the choices aren't great, but at least there's a choice. This is another part of taking responsibility for yourself, is knowing you have a choice, even when there appears to be no choice available. Even when you believe you're stuck and you have zero options and you're in a rut that's too deep to climb out of, if you tell yourself, I do have a choice. I may not like the choice I have or the choices, but I do have a choice. I'm just choosing not to make that choice. I'm choosing not to go in that direction because I don't want what comes about if I make that choice. If I make that choice, I don't want the consequence of that choice, so I'm not going to make it. I'm either afraid of it, or I believe I know what's going to happen, so I don't want to do it, or something else. But as soon as you take your choices away, you are more likely to feel disempowered, feeling like you have no other option but to keep doing what you're doing and keep getting the same results you're getting because you feel like you can't do anything else. I hear this about relationships all the time. I can't leave this person because XYZ. And they're truly valid concerns, but are they a rut so high that you couldn't climb out of it? Or are you just making the choice to not make the choice you don't want to make? Again, there are situations that feel hopeless. And sometimes you can look at every single option and realize you do have no choice. I know there are exceptions to everything I talk about here, but in a lot of cases, I would say over 95% of the cases that I hear about, the people that write to me, the people that talk to me, they say, I have no choice. Then I'll present a choice that they won't like, and they'll say, I can't do that. And I'll ask why, and they'll give me a very legit reason. They'll say, this is why. And I will respond, yeah, that is tough. I wouldn't want to do that either. And then I'll ask the question, which they probably don't want to face, is if you had no choice but to make that choice, how would that look? That might be one question I ask. Or it could be a question like, let's just say that what you want to happen will never happen. Then what? What are you going to do then? So what you're waiting for to happen, what you're hoping for will happen, I guarantee you won't happen. Now what are you going to do? Do your choices change then? For example, like my mom. She was in a relationship with a very abusive person for 40 years. And the question, well, what if he never changes and never leaves, and this is the way it'll be forever? Because she was wishing and hoping and praying that he would just leave her. But the question that she didn't want to face was, what if he never leaves, he never dies, and he stays with you for the rest of your life? Are you going to continue making the same choices you're making now? Now, I didn't necessarily ask her that question, but I've asked other people that question. But it is a legitimate question if she was still with him, because he did end up leaving, but it took 40 years. It's just like almost forever. 40 years is a long time. But some people face this dilemma. They are in a bad situation and they go to this bad situation. They show up in this bad situation every single day of their life. And then they hope and wish and pray that it changes. But I don't like not knowing. I don't like not knowing when something's going to change. So I like to put a deadline on it. I like to tell myself, if this doesn't change by this date, then I need to do something different. I like to ask the question, what if this never ever changes? What if what's happening now, this person, this job, this thing that you're going through, what if it never ever changes? What are you going to do then? Thinking in that way opens your mind. It gives you more choices because you're probably considering something you hadn't considered before. This is how you create more choices in your life when you feel like you have none. Now, this is some thin ice stuff too, because somebody's going to say, well, what if I feel like I have no choice and I should just take my own life? I'm going to go there. I think we should go there because some people think this way. I have no choice, so I'm going to take my own life. And I get that. I've been in that thought process. I've felt that. I've thought that. And I thought that was my only choice. But when I think back of when I felt suicidal, when I felt like that it would be easier to take my own life, I thought about the other choices that I didn't want to make because I was too scared. I didn't want to make certain other choices in my life. I didn't want to face those fears because facing those fears was worse than just ending my life. That's my thought process back then. I thought it would be easier to end my life than to face the consequences of the choices that I wanted to make, but I was too afraid to make. Now, in my situation, I was upset, I was angry, I was sad, and I was getting over, I think, a relationship back then, and all kinds of things going on. So I thought I had no other choices. The problem is when you're in that mindset where you think you have no other choice, it's because when you're in that state of mind, you believe that this is all there is. You believe that there's no way out. You believe that you have no other options. And that belief becomes the lens that you see the world through. But in my experience, in my own life, I have learned that it's always temporary. That belief, that mindset is always temporary. So you go through it thinking there's no other option. This is it. This is how it's going to be forever. So what's the point of being here? But it's always temporary. Everyone I've talked to that has gone through this has gone through it. They've had to get through it to get to the other side of it. So I'm not here specifically to dwell on suicidal thoughts or anything like that, but I don't think it's a good idea to just gloss over it. I think it's important to address it and allow it to come up, express it to someone else. That's one of the most important things I did when I was younger, in my 20s, when I felt this way, was to express it to somebody else. I didn't want to express it. I didn't want to talk about that. But once I was able to get it out of my system, it was like giving my emotions a voice, giving my body a voice, everything I felt inside of me. I was able to talk about and release the pressure that was building up inside of me. Always good to talk to people. Find somebody that you trust. Find somebody that you can connect with, or pay a professional, whatever. Talk to a chaplain in church, wherever you can find somebody that'll listen. I mean, there are even the number like 988 in the U.S. That is the suicide hotline. I know for the U.S., and you can look up international numbers as well. Just want to throw that out there in case anyone needs it. Anyway, I'm going to come back to the main topic, which was, what's it about? It's about, emotional intelligence and communication, and taking responsibility for the meaning of your communication. This is really what an emotionally intelligent conversation is all about, is taking responsibility for the way you communicate and how you communicate, and the fact that they aren't getting it. Now, this doesn't work with everyone. Here's the caveat. It doesn't work with people who don't care, who don't want to know what you think or how to learn what you're trying to tell them, or have an agenda. These are people that aren't necessarily on your side, aren't necessarily willing to cooperate, and especially don't care how you communicate a message to them. These are the kinds of people that I was talking about that you might either accidentally or just happenstance bring into your life, and now you have a misalignment. So you bring in other things into your life. What aligns with you? What are your values? What do you care about? And then you bring in somebody that may not share those values and what you care about. Maybe they only care about themselves, or maybe they care about something else. We just have to be careful. We have to be aware and take responsibility for having those people in our life. That doesn't mean we put them there or that they just won't leave. I mean, there are things that we don't have control over, so we try, but we do have to take responsibility for the choices we made to have them in our life. Does that mean it's your fault? No, we're just taking responsibility. And what that means is, if they're a liar, if they're a cheater, if they're a con artist, if whatever they are, then having them in our life changes our life. It changes who we are, because we are now reacting and responding and communicating with somebody that doesn't have our best interest in mind, probably, and is going to alter the way we think, the way we communicate. It's going to alter a lot of things because that person's in our life. If you have somebody like that in your life and you can change the situation, great. If you can't, then this is where choice comes in, and asking yourself, what choice do I have, or what choices are available to me? And also not limiting yourself to what you believe is no way out. You know, that rut that you can't climb out of because it's so deep. See the choices, add choices that you don't believe you have, so that you can give yourself more power. As soon as you say, I have no choice, you have no power. You might not like the choices you have, but as soon as you add choices that you may not like, you might have to consider making one of those choices. And I'll come right back to that question that I asked earlier. If nothing ever changes, like if it's a person, if that person never ever changes, if the situation never ever changes, are you going to stick around? What are you going to do now? If you say, I don't know, that's fine. That's a real answer. But the next thing you should say is, okay, what other options do I have? And this is where my mom got stuck. She was in that long-term relationship, and she got stuck in the thought that I can't leave because I have no money and no place to live. And she was also afraid. So there were three things going on there. I have no money, I have no other place to live, and I'm afraid. What didn't occur to her was that there were so many people around her ready to step in, ready to protect her, ready to pay for whatever she needed, ready to give her a home. But she didn't want to leave because of her fear of the unknown, her fear of the abyss of not knowing. So she stayed in a disempowered state all that time, 40 years, because she did not want to find out what was on the other side of a decision that she didn't want to make. So she gave herself no choice but to stay. And it's a sad story. I mean, our family looks at her situation or what she experienced in the past, and we were just hoping that she would accept our offer to help, to protect, to finance her, to do anything we could to get her out of that situation. But her main challenge was not knowing what would happen next if she made that change, because she had been in it for so long. She'd been doing the same thing every day for so long that it didn't make sense to her. It wasn't even part of her thought process to think that she could do something else. Doing something else was even scary for her. Some people have a fear of change, any change, even if it's a good change, because they get used to what is. It's like the difference between the evil you know and the evil you don't. She stayed with the evil she knew, and I'm just using evil as part of that phrase. I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but it's the idea that you are comfortable being uncomfortable. You've gotten comfortable staying in that place because at least you're alive the next day. I mean, I don't know what her thought process was fully back then, but I'm sure that was part of it. At least I'm alive. At least I've got shelter. At least I've got food. At least I'm okay in other ways. But she hated living there. She hated living with this person. And she wanted something else. She wanted things to change. She just didn't want to initiate the change. And I don't want you to be afraid to the point where you can't initiate your own change, because sometimes you have to. Sometimes you have no choice but to initiate your own change. So what do? You consider that what is happening now won't ever stop. And it's pretty easy to tell it won't stop if it's been happening for a long time. I look at the trend. If it's been happening and happening every day for the past 6 months, a year, 6 years, 10 years, 60 years, it's not going to change. This is how it is. And this is how it will be, unless you do something about it. And that can be the scary part. This show is being recorded right at the end of 2023, going into the new year, 2024. And yes, I did not mention that we're going into a new year. I didn't say this is the New Year show. I think there are a lot of other shows doing that now. I don't dwell on that. I think it's important to talk about all this stuff anytime. But if you are listening to this at the end of 2023 or the beginning of 2024, what a great way to go into the new year, believing you have more choices or making more choices for you if you believe you're stuck, if you believe that you're in a rut that you can't climb out of. There's always a choice. It's just sometimes we don't like it. Sometimes we don't like those choices. And yeah, I've had to make choices in my life that I did not like at all. One of them was actually staying single. One of the first things I did after my marriage ended a long time ago was making the choice to stay single. And I didn't like it because I was always afraid to be single. I was always afraid to be unhappy because I believed being single meant being unhappy. I knew that I received my happiness from another person, or at least that was my belief back then. So being single by choice, that was not something I'd ever considered. And at the end of my marriage, I knew that, okay, I screwed up all these relationships. I screwed up my marriage. What do I need to do differently? My first thought was getting into another relationship while I figure that out. But then I realized I got to do something different to figure this out. I have to do something that I haven't done before, and that is to not be in a relationship and finally not have anyone else influence me, not have anyone else in my life that could cause me to make different decisions about my life. What do I think about when I'm alone? What do I think about when no one else is around to influence my decisions? That was important to me. And because I'd never done it before, I had to do it. I had to learn who I was without another person in my life. And so I did. And that changed my life. I finally realized that I could survive alone, that I could be happy without somebody else in my life. And then I would have more choices. I could choose to be happy alone, or I could choose to be happy with somebody else. But either way, I'd be okay. I wanted to have more than one option to achieve being happy. I wanted to know that I could be happy in other ways because I was so limited in believing that the only way to be happy was to be with somebody else. Being with somebody else definitely makes me happy. It makes me happier than being by myself, but I'm still okay either way. And that opens up my choices. That makes me realize that I'm not stuck either way as well. I'm not stuck with somebody I don't want to be with. I'm not stuck with somebody that I do want to be with. I could choose. And having the choice, having that option to choose, gives me the freedom to do basically anything I want. I don't do that. I don't do just anything I want, but knowing that I have the freedom to do that, knowing that I won't limit myself because of my own fears or my own beliefs, it removes all the stress. It removes all the pressure, the feelings of oppression that often come with the belief that you have no choice. When you feel that way, when you know you have choices, you are more likely to commit. You are more likely to dedicate yourself, to fully immerse yourself in whatever you're doing, because you know you could leave anytime if you had to. You know you could make a different choice if you had to. That's what I've learned, is that I've learned that I can be fully committed to the people in my life, to the work I do, knowing that I can also let it go. But having that choice of letting it go at any time has made me even more dedicated, more committed, and has allowed the bond between the people and the things that I do grow stronger. It's just something that happens when you feel empowered. You know you could do anything you want, and you choose to do this. And having that choice to either do it or not makes you feel empowered, makes you feel more fulfilled, makes you happier. And who wouldn't want more of that? Who wouldn't dedicate themselves to more of that? I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying that it's something that everyone can do. I'm just saying keep an open mind, because that's how you step into your power so that you can create the life you want. This is how you take steps to grow and evolve. I'm so grateful you tuned in today. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Overwhelmed Brain. I want to thank our patrons of the week. They are Wanda, Chris, Michelle, Victoria Dilek. Kenneth is new. So grateful to have you, Kenneth. Thank you for joining the patron program, and you're backing the show. Thank you so much, all of you. I am honored that you value the show and decided to give back. Again, thank you, Kenneth, and all patrons. You all mean the world to me. If you value the show like these patrons do and you want to give back, head over to moretob.com, and you have options to do that over there. For a show on how to deal with difficult relationships, visit loveandabuse.com. And if you know you're the difficult one in the relationship, head over to healedbeing.com, where I have a comprehensive program that will help you stop being hurtful to those you love. Finally, thanks to Kevin McLeod of Incompetech.com for some of the music transitions in The Overwhelmed Brain. For my final thoughts, I'm just going to read you the notes I had for today's episode and why they didn't go in that direction. Well, they went a little bit in that direction. Like the first note you've already heard, which is, I really think practicing emotional intelligence is more about assuming you are solely responsible for conveying a message that can be understood, as opposed to assuming the person trying to receive the message is incompetent. I think that's a really good philosophy to have. If you always assume the other person's incompetent, how will you feel about talking to them? It'll be a hassle. They're incompetent, I'm not going to talk to them. However, if you take responsibility for how you convey the message and how it is interpreted, that changes things, and you're able to have probably a better conversation. I'm not saying it works with everyone, but it's a great philosophy to adopt if you are wanting to have a better relationship with people. So that was my first note. My second note says, then when all else fails and you've discovered that no matter how you convey a message, if it never gets understood, to accept your inability to convey the message in a way that can be understood by that person. In other words, you're taking responsibility that you aren't conveying the message in a way that can be understood. It's the same type of message I just gave, but that is, I don't have the ability to convey the message in a way that can be understood by that person. You're taking responsibility by saying you don't have the ability. Is that true? I think it is. If you don't have the ability, it doesn't mean you're incompetent. It just means that you're trying to convey the message and they don't understand for whatever reason. So if you've tried and every which way you try, it doesn't work, maybe you don't have that ability to convey a message that they understand, and that keeps you from getting upset with them. So you can see how that might make a relationship a little bit more tolerable if it's not, or if you're having challenges with it. The next thing I wrote down was the flip side to this is when someone doesn't want to understand you or doesn't care. I sort of went over this already, but I didn't continue, which is saying if this were a perfect world and our goal was to do our best to understand each other and honor each other's boundaries and support each other's values and just be honest, we wouldn't have to practice emotional intelligence at all because misunderstandings wouldn't cause problems. They'd be accepted as a part of life. In other words, when we had a misunderstanding, we wouldn't be blaming each other. We wouldn't be saying, you're stupid or you're an idiot or why aren't you getting this? So let's just agree that it's a misunderstanding and try to communicate in a different way. That's a perfect world. My final note is when we misunderstand someone else or when there's a disagreement in perspective or opinion, we wouldn't be offended. We would be curious. We would want to know more. And instead of trying to get the other person to accept our position or beliefs, we'd accept them exactly as they are because we'd honor the choices they make and made for themselves, even if we disagree with those choices. Imagine having a conversation with somebody that you have a 100% difference of opinion with. You absolutely are on different sides of an issue, and instead of trying to drill into their head the point of view that you want them to accept, you ask questions. Really? Why do you think that? That's fascinating. Tell me more. By approaching things with curiosity, what you're doing is allowing them to be heard and allowing them to be understood. You're giving them the floor to speak their point without trying to convince them that they're wrong or they're stupid. And even if they won't listen to you, even if you are curious and you're asking questions, but they refuse to do the same thing, sometimes it's better to just walk away and know that they will never even care about your point. They'll never even care about the facts. They'll never even care about anything that you have to say because they're so stuck in what they have to say. But what you've done is show them that you're willing to listen to them. And maybe someday they'll be willing to listen to you because you gave them that opportunity. But until then, there's really nothing you can do. You can show up, you can listen, you can ask questions, but if they aren't ready to do that with you, then they won't be until they're ready. They won't get into that space that you're in until they want to, and they may never want to. And if that's the case, there's really nothing you could do anyway. You could argue until the sun went down and came back up, and there are some people that will never, ever be convinced or hear your side of it, so there's really nothing you can do about it anyway, so why bother? That's how I feel sometimes. Why bother with some people? It's not worth it. I have better places to spend my time and spend my energy. I'm not saying you have to give up or anything like that. I'm just saying sometimes you just have to pick your battles wisely. Just remember, you are powerful beyond measure, and not everyone knows that. So you gotta, take responsibility for that power. And something I absolutely know to be true about you, and I hope you know it too. You are amazing.